Hello, my name is Joe Chavez, and today I will be talking to you about lie detector tests. Lie detector tests are usually done via an instrument called a polygraph. This instrument focuses on 3 indicators of independent arousal, which are the heart rate, respiration, and skin conductivity. There are 2 most widely used formats for this test. The first is the controlled question test, which compares relevant questions to controlled questions. And the second is the guilty knowledge test, which asks questions that only a guilty person could possibly know. My main claim today is that the polygraph test is not accurate enough to determine whether or not a person is being truthful. My sub-claims to this is that there's no scientific evidence to back evidence from lie detector tests. The second one is that throughout the history of the United States, the results of these tests were critically wrong. And the third one is that the courts of the United States do not entirely allow the results from these tests to be used during the trial. So going back to my first claim, that there's no scientific evidence to prove that the lie detector test can really tell if a person is lying. Any technique that's derived from the scientific principles has to be able to be tested over and over and validated by different scientists or research groups. In order to do this, for a lie detector test, you would have to gather a bunch of random people and test them, which does not seem logical. So that's why lie detector tests cannot be backed by science, because there's no real way to test them unless you just look at cases that have been done throughout the history. The method of these polygraphs rely on psychological reactions that the body emits, which have been found to have no link in actual deception of a person. Although these tests have been found to be highly accurate, it's only because the person that's being tested truly believes that it can tell whether it's lying or not, and confesses to his or her crime anyway. Even though I wasn't able to find a specific research or evidence, there have been a variety of research in scientific psychology and sociology that provides little basis that these tests can turn out to be highly accurate. My secondary claim is that throughout the history of the United States, when these results were used for something that they were proved to be clearly wrong. A man by the name Aldrich Ames was a former CIA agent, took multiple polygraph tests and passed them all. It was later discovered by the CIA that he was in fact a Soviet spy. However, this knowledge that they discovered of him being a Soviet spy did not come from one of those tests that he took. The way he was able to pass these tests was because the Russians taught him countermeasures, which can be used in tests to alter the results. Countermeasures can be something simply as inflicting pain on yourself so that the results from the test can be altered in your favor. Now, since the Cold War of the 1940s, thousands of polygraph screening exams have been conducted by agencies such as the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA, and they have yet to uncover a single spy. However, since that time, there have been 150 cases where spies were discovered in the United States, and not a single one came from these lie detector tests. Going to my third and final claim is that the lie detector tests are not entirely admissible in the courts of the United States. The courts of the United States have repeatedly rejected the use of the results of these tests in trials because they have been found to be inherently unreliable. An example of this is the case of U.S. v. Sheffer, where the former U.S. airman was accused of using meth. However, he argued that he never knowingly used it. So he took a test and he passed, which showed that he was telling the truth. However, the court denied him the use of his results because of the unreliability that they have. Today, there are many laws in the United States that whether or not allow you to use the results in different states. States like California, Arizona, Nevada, and Florida, you can use the evidence in the court only if both parties agree on it. And even then, each state has a different law to interpret the results. In states like New York, Texas, and Illinois, even if both parties do agree on a polygraph exam, it's forbidden in court. So my main claim today was that the polygraph test is not accurate enough to determine whether or not a person is being truthful, and to back this, I used my 3 sub-claims that there is scientific evidence to back them that they are accurate. Throughout the history of the United States, there were tests that were clearly wrong in their results. And the third one is that the courts of the United States do not entirely allow the use of these tests. Thank you.
All right, Joe, the topic identification was fine. You give us some definition and description as background. That's pretty good. You do talk about the 2 types of tests at the beginning before you even get to the proposition, but those types of tests never come up again in the discussion, so I'm not sure why you're bothering to define them. You do identify the supporting claims pretty reasonably, and then you transition to the main body of the speech. There was a clear signpost on the first point. Now, the supporting material on the first point, you start off by talking about it not being able to be scientifically validated, and you make some general statements about how these tests would have to be done. And it's not clear to me why it's not possible to do the test under the conditions that you've described. There's no evidence that indicates these tests haven't been performed. There's no evidence that shows that tests have been performed and they were inaccurate. So it's really kind of vague as to what your criticism on that particular point can be. The claim that you do make a claim that there is no real link to the physical material that's being described. But again, that's mostly asserted. I didn't hear any source on that. And you yourself kind of acknowledge that there isn't any citation on a couple of these points, which I think undermines your credibility a little bit, but also seems to suggest that you need to do some more research on this, particularly if the respondent comes back with a whole series of studies that show some degree of validity or accuracy of those tests. Then we're going to just have your comparative general criticisms to the research that the advocates or the opponent cites, and that's going to weigh against you in that situation. On the second point, I thought you had some pretty good examples to illustrate your point. The Aldrich Ames illustration, you do want to give source citations on that. That's a pretty well-known case. I don't remember the stuff about the polygraph and how many tests that he passed. The information that he was trained with countermeasures, that's probably in one of those books that's been written about that case, so you should be citing the source for that information. And the claim that those countermeasures are effective, like the self-inflicted pain, again, I need some source citation on that. You've got factual data on the third point, so I don't think there's a lot of dispute that that is true, but again, I think a citation would be appropriate. You mentioned states that allow it if both have accepted, both sides in the case accept it, and then states that exclude it entirely. And I know you got that information from someplace. It shouldn't be hard to cite it. You just need to be consistent about doing that in the presentation. All right, thank you.